MaXXXine has just been released at the cinema. It is directed by Ty West and stars Mia Goth, and it's also the third film in a trilogy featuring the characters of Pearl and Maxine. So this one kind of takes place directly after X, which was the first film in the trilogy. Pearl was the prequel to X. And those two films, Pearl and X, were really great horror movies, particularly Pearl. I thought was a fantastic horror movie. I also felt that the two of those films had a great deal to say about various matters, and I was really looking forward to MaXXXine as a result of that. In fact, MaXXXine was probably my most anticipated horror movie of the year. So this picks up sometime a few years after the events of X. Maxine has gone to Hollywood. She's trying to make it as an actress in Hollywood. She's started in the porn industry. She's now trying to make that jump from the porn industry into proper movies. And she's found basically a part. She's gained a part in a horror movie, which was a customary kind of tradition back in the 80s, which is when this film is set, smack bang in the middle of the 80s, in fact, during the video nasty era. Funnily enough, this film features Kevin Bacon, who made his start in Friday the 13th. A good piece of casting there, very good piece of casting, in fact, because he's one of the best things about this movie. So while she's trying to make this movie and get her career going, there is a serial killer stalking the streets of Hollywood, the Night Stalker, which I believe is an actual case, a real murder case. The Night Stalker, I remember a lot of things around the Night Stalker, so that aspect of it is real, although not really delved into a great deal. It's mostly kind of used to steer the film in other directions as we follow this other killer that is basically stalking Maxine. He knows a lot about her history, where she's come from. He knows about the events that took place in X, even though that seems to have gone undetected by the police, and he uses that against her. So that's it, basically. She has to try and find out who the identity of this killer is, stop them from messing up her career, and basically decide what to do. Now, I recently reviewed X, and I would imagine anyone going into this film would most likely have seen, at the very least, would have seen X, if not Pearl. But certainly in the screening I was in, there was a couple that went in there, and as they were sitting down, I heard the girl mention something about Googling what the film was about, and then the guy said, oh, it's a sequel, and then she said, what? And then literally about 40 minutes into the film, they left. Presumably she wasn't happy. So yeah, I think going into this film, not seeing X, and preferably Pearl as well, because that is the best of the three, I will say that much, then yeah, I don't think you're going to get a right lot out of this if you haven't seen those. But even if you have seen those, I would be surprised to find many people who aren't a little let down. Got to be said. I was a little let down. Given how much I was anticipating this film, I was quite disappointed. Now, it is very well made, you know, as were obviously the previous two movies. Like from a directing standpoint, Ty West knows how to use the camera. He knows how to get a particular kind of emotion stirred within the viewer by doing something with the camera and with his actors and all that kind of stuff. So he knows what he's doing from a directorial standpoint. The weak spots in this are primarily from the script, which really suffers from a third act that is just, it's bonkers and overblown and slightly nonsensical, and it's trying to do too much. This is the problem. And it also has a killer reveal that I saw come in, well, since X, really, since the end of X. Now, when I did my review of X, I did mention in that there was an element of the film that they kind of touched on, but didn't delve into too much. And that was my one kind of I was a bit iffy on it. I was a bit like, where are they going with that? And I had a feeling that they would at the very least touch on it in this film, or at least delve into that. And that element was the fact that Maxine has run away from a home that was a religious home. Her father was a preacher, and we end that film on the revelation that she is this daughter who has run away or gone missing or whatever, and her preacher father is on the TV talking about kind of getting her back and this, that, and the other. Now that feeds directly into this film, and this film even opens up with a sequence, a piece of home video footage from Maxine's childhood, and right from the outset, I instantly knew who the killer was going to be. Now, I felt like that was a red herring. It was maybe something to steer you away from who the killer might be. That's what I'd hoped for at any rate, but it wasn't. And literally, I sat there waiting for this killer reveal that I pretty much knew who it was going to be. And when it was very unsatisfying because I could see it coming. Fair enough, whatever. If the killer is going to be obvious, if we know who it's going to be, fine. But when they show up, you've then at least got to do something with it that matters. And I feel like that's where they dropped the ball in this film. So they spend a lot of time in this film kind of painting it as this story of female empowerment, of Maxine kind of, having run away from the religious abuses of her home life, only to find her way into the abuses of the Hollywood system that treat women like crap. But basically in the 80s, this is going back to the time when literally, the case could definitely be made that women had the rough end of the stick in the Hollywood studio system. They were used for sex and they were sold as sexual objects in movies, in horror movies. And that is very much depicted here in this film. So we're seeing how, okay, this woman is going to rise above all that, stop being a victim, take control of her life. And yeah, it's a tale of female empowerment. But it also wants to be this big commentary on how Hollywood kind of chews people up and spits them out and uses them as products, and it's just, it's basically just not a very nice place to be. And not satisfied with that, the film also wants to be this huge commentary on religion and religious zealots in particular, and those who in the 80s, like constant kind of banners that have banned this sick film, banned that sick film, the attack against horror movies by the far-right religious establishment that, I'm aware they existed. So that's kind of what this film looks at to a degree. But it also kind of turns the tables on the religious establishment almost to blame them for that violence, to blame them for the way that Hollywood is. And it's murky. It gets murky. Once we're into the third and final act, it all gets murky, because I feel like all those elements that Ti West is trying to deal with are not dealt with particularly well, and you're left kind of scratching your head going, well, okay, well, who exactly are you trying to blame? Who is the victim? Who is the aggressor? And I come away from it essentially just not rooting for anyone and just thinking, okay, humanity is scum and we've all got ourselves to blame and we're all just as bad as one another, whichever side of the fence you're on. Which, I don't know, maybe that is the intended kind of outcome, but it's not done in the best possible way. I feel like Ti West is trying to deal with too much and he's not quite equipped enough as a writer to deal with it, which I wouldn't have thought, because I feel like with Pearl in particular, he showed quite a lot of talent as a writer. And I know Mia Goth had a writing credit on that film as well, so who knows, maybe her input in the script department on that film considerably helped it. But certainly this one is the weakest of the three when it comes to the writing. There's still a lot in it that I do like. You know, as I said, Kevin Bacon as this sleazy detective, the way he kind of rubs up against Maxine and it becomes like a game of cat and mouse. He's like the detective working for the killer that's going to be revealed. Ooh, who can it be? Kevin Bacon plays it brilliantly. He's very watchable every time he's on screen. And when him and Maxine are kind of in scenes together, I'm highly entertained by it. I want to know who's going to come out on top, who's going to win. I like the fact that Maxine just doesn't kind of give a crap. She doesn't just jump straight into damsel in distress mode. You know, there are multiple moments in this film where she finds herself in a situation where she essentially is in distress, but she quickly turns the tables. She realizes, like a trapped rat, that the only way I'm getting out of this situation is by fighting. And she does, and she doesn't hold back. There's one particular ball crunching scene in it that, like, literally every guy in the theatre, myself included, I saw their legs go up and cross when this particular scene happened. You'll know what I'm talking about when you see the film, or if you've already seen the film. It makes me want to protect my balls even now as I'm talking about it. It's quite grim. So the horror element, you know, if that's what you're coming for, like the horror element that was in X, that was quite full on, that is here as well. The setting I really like, you know, setting it in the 80s, given the themes that West is trying to deal with, I think it's the perfect time and place to set the film in, even if he mishandles it in regards to, you know, how the elements of the story play out. There are little moments in the film that kind of have something to say about the character of Maxine as to where she's at. You know, she puts on a lot of bravado as to, you know, someone who's willing to do whatever it takes to get where she wants to get to. You know, like we see her turning up, getting ready for a porn shoot, but then she has to some coke, and that's very revealing, I think, with regards to what she has to do to herself to get herself into the right headspace, or the wrong headspace, as far as I'm concerned, in order to get in front of a camera and perform sex acts. So, you know, like it's not a particularly healthy line of business, I don't think. You know, like, people can make the argument all they want for porn, but I think X did a very good job of showing the negative sides of it, and as far as I'm concerned, there are only negative sides to porn, and I think here we get a glimpse of that as well, with little moments like that. The fact that she has to snort some coke before she goes onto set says a lot about what it is she's doing. There is a mantra that is raised in X and in this film as well. It's carried over into this film. It's like the slogan that Maxine uses really to guide her in life, which is this idea that I will not settle for a life I don't deserve. And I feel that's interesting because, from my perspective, from a Christian perspective, so to speak, we don't deserve anything. This mentality of saying, well, I deserve much more, therefore I'm not going to settle for less, actually has taken her down a pretty dark road that has led to murder, has led to, you know, performing sexual acts in front of a camera for money. And I don't really see her being in a good place at the end of it all. You know, some might say that she's reached her goal. Some might say that she's achieved what she set out to do. But actually, I think it's a ringing indictment of what you've got to do to get there and what you lose as a result of getting there. That being your soul. You know, for those who set out for a career in Hollywood, think about everything you actually have to give up in order to get the life you deserve. I think ultimately that might be what the film is trying to say, but again, that's just one of many messages in an overstuffed, overcooked kind of boiling pot that is really a bit of a mess, which is a shame, as I say. Again, from a technical standpoint, visually it's stunning. The performances are all great, except one particular performance, and that is the killer. When the killer makes their way on screen, when they arrive, I just think their performance is so over the top, so overblown. It's like it's from a completely different film, and I didn't like it. It just, yeah, again, the first 2 acts of this I enjoyed. I think it feels like it's going places. I like all the characters in it, and it feels like it's leading somewhere that's going to be, intriguing, have something to say and be quite dark and really get to grips with these characters. And then the third act just like drops the ball, craps the bed, and I'm like, oh, really? So you've got all that build up, all that nice work building up to that moment, and you even got to use the Bates Motel. As a huge Psycho fan, there's a whole sequence in this because we take place on a studio lot. We go to the actual Bates Motel, and there's a rather effective moment in that where they use the Bates Motel to kind of draw correlations really between the character of Maxine and Norman Bates, which I thought was a nice touch. Again, like I say, as a huge fan of the Psycho movies, I enjoyed that. But on the whole, it all falls apart in that third act. So yeah, there you go. That's my thoughts on MaXXXine. But what are yours? Have you seen it? Have you seen the first 2 movies? And if so, what did you think about this one? And how would you rank it overall in this trilogy of films? Leave your comments down below. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching this review, and until next time, cracking.